Hello YouTube, my name is Mark. This is Nixon Motorsports Garage. This channel is all about motorsports, from auto racing to exotic cars, even simulators. Topics from how to purchase a race car, how to maintain a race car, setup, driver techniques, and so on. Obviously, there are many topics in this space. Your comments, your thoughts, opinion are very welcome, so please comment. And if you like this video, of course, subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Today's video is about a Motec conversion project that I will undertake this winter in prep for the upcoming race season. The topics will include why am I doing this, what are the reasons behind it, some of the selection of the components for the build, and you will see a multiple segment video series that will actually show all the steps that I'm going through in doing this project. So hang on, and here we go. So the Formula 1000 has been around for a little while. This race car first appeared in the market around, I believe it was 2006. And if I'm honest with you, when I first saw this race car, I was actually racing Toyota Atlantics. And the Atlantics were and are pretty powerful modern race cars, monochrome, carbon monochrome chassis and so on. I first saw this race car, not this particular one, but I saw it and it looked very attractive, looked very, very cool actually, like a little mini Formula One car. And I got closer to it and I saw that it was chain driven, so it apparently had a motorcycle engine in it, and it was a tube chassis and so on. And when I first saw that, I thought, you know, not so interesting. I'm way past that though, I gotta tell you. So I'll get into the car here in just a minute and the specifics about this car. But after I raced Atlantics for a handful of years, I've had champ cars. I've had, you know, pretty intense, very fast open wheel race cars over the years. And I wanted to get back into racing again about 4 or 5 years ago, and did not want to go back in Atlantics again. And quite honestly, racing a champ car or, you know, Indy car, really the only venue you have is the professional level. So I found a Formula 1000 race car, this one actually that I purchased, and I've had it now for the last 4 years, 4.5 years. I've been racing it in the US Majors, which is amateur racing, for the last 4 years. And I got to tell you, so my story in the beginning, how I was not so impressed, I am so far past that. These cars are actually a blast to drive. For any of you who've had experience in driving or racing shifter karts. Shifter karts are pretty fast, right? Great horsepower to weight ratio, very nimble. This has probably a closer feel to that than the other race cars that I've had. So there you go. But specifically, so this car itself, and the Formula 1000 series, again, started about 2006. And initially, the goals, I think, behind the class was to build a car that had great performance, reasonable cost per mile, and the original cars, and they still are, designed as a tubular chassis. Lower cost items like fiberglass, you're not able to use carbon fiber in the car for development, with one exception, the nose cone, which is a crest structure, of course, is carbon fiber, but the rest of the car is fiberglass. Motorcycle powered, and the idea between or behind the design of the race car is, as I said, you know, great performance, good cost per mile, and so on. So the class itself started that way and still is that way. And let me talk about, again, before I get into more specifics on the car, differences to a degree of what's a spec class, a spec car, versus a car that maybe is more of an open development car. And a spec class or car, for an example, let's see, a good example would be like the modern Formula 4s. Right, the Formula 4 car and the series, the class and series, is actually a great entry-level open-wheel modern race car. But there's an example of a spec car, and what I mean by that is everything is the same for every driver. Motors are sealed. You can't touch them. Gearboxes are sealed. Parts are not interchangeable. They're identical. In fact, I believe the Formula 4, I believe the only thing you can change on the car is I think they give you 2 different spring combinations that you can use. You're not able to change dampeners. You're not able to change gear ratios, on and on and on. So that gives you an idea, I hope, of a spec car where changes to the car are minimal, and it's really setup and driver only, right? Where an open development class, and that's my term, which the Formula 1000 does fall into, obviously has specs and rules that you have to follow, but you have a fair amount of latitude within the class itself. So while this car, for an example, has rules that say it has to be a motorcycle engine, it cannot be larger than 1,000 cc's, so 1,000 cc's, thus Formula 1000, right? And the minimum weight of the car is 1,000 pounds, and that's 1,000 pounds wet, meaning with the driver, fuel, and so on, you're not able to run at a lower weight on track under 1,000 pounds. So at 1,000 cc's with modern engines, you're getting about 200, 210 plus horsepower. At 1,000 pounds, not too bad horsepower to weight ratio, right? But back to the open development comment. This car, for an example, I purchased used 4.5 years ago, and I've been developing this car ever since. So body work, for an example, brakes. When I first got this car, it had I think it was an 08 GSXR Suzuki motor in it. Since then, I've upgraded, converted this to a 2019 ZX10RR motor. It's a Kawasaki engine. Electronics, dampeners, you know, on and on and on. So I like that ability where you can constantly push and develop the car. You know, going fast is a lot of things, right? Everybody's going to know this. It's the engine, it's the chassis, it's the driver. And all of those things combined are what give you either a competitive advantage or not. So this car, back to specs on this again, clearly there are many rules that you have to follow. So as I talked about, you know, you have weight limits, you have engine requirements, and so on. But there's quite a few things that or areas within the car that you can continue to develop. So this car, from a performance point of view, top speed depends on the track configuration, right? Roughly around 140, 150 miles an hour top speed. I've heard drivers at, I think it was Daytona a few years ago, they had their cars extremely trimmed out, and they were, I heard, in the 160, low 160 range. I personally have not seen that. I raced, I think it was 17 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway in this car for the national championships. I had it relatively trimmed out. I forgot my exact top speed, but I was around 150, I think, thereabouts, down the straight, 153, 154. So top speed's kind of in that range, but you'll see typically it's around 140 to 150 at the high side. Brakes and braking and cornering in these cars is phenomenal. I made that reference earlier about very much kind of like a shifter cart, nimble and so on. I see 3 Gs in braking, which any of you who are in race cars today know what that means. That's pretty intense. I see around 3 Gs when the car's hooked up right in lateral Gs in cornering, which is pretty impressive. And the car with downforce, I see through data a little over 1,000 pounds of downforce on the car. Maybe 1,100, but around 1,000 pounds of downforce, which is actually fantastic for a car that weighs 1,000 pounds wet, right? So that gives you an idea of the car. I hope that helps. Now let's get on and I'll show you some of the electronics for this build up next, okay? So I thought I would spend a minute and talk about the why I'm doing the Motec conversion to the Formula 1000 race car. And it goes back to seeking more performance for the most part. But if you recall, I talked about the F1000 a moment ago and at least did a quick introduction of the car. There's one rule that I forgot to mention, and there's many, of course, rules. But the car, or the class requirements for the car, up until the end of 2018 required that you run the OEM or the bike stock ECU. And while that worked well for price reasons, it had a problem, at least from what I've seen, of you don't have complete access into controlling and understanding the engine. So there's software out there that you can use, of course, to flash the ECU, and many of you have probably heard people doing that, where you can flash it, you can change like ignition maps, fuel maps, rev limits, and a few other parameters. It does not give you full access into all the different trims and the conditions that ECUs will make in managing and controlling the engine. And so I saw in my last race this last November issues where my engine would start to degrade in performance. I would feel it and then see it through data, and unfortunately just chasing our tail to a degree, trying to understand what's going on with the engine's performance and why are we seeing it fall off. Now obviously, air temps and water temps and all sorts of things can change engine performance. So that was one of the prime reasons of making this change. So then you could ask, well, why Motec? And it's for a few reasons. So I've used AIM. In fact, the car has AIM systems in it today. I've used Stack before. I've used Motec before. The primary reason is I wanted and needed to have an ECU, an engine control unit, that was able to take over from the bike's OEM box itself. And so that narrowed what company, what product, what manufacturers to a degree. And so I turned to Motec for the ECU. And because I did that, for me, it just made sense to move the rest of the components in the car, at least in the data and electrical sense, along the same family for consistent communications and ability for devices to talk with one another. So Motec will be the ECU, the data logger, the display, power control, all those things now are being upgraded into Motec, okay? So hopefully that helps from the why. Let me show you some of the product and some of the items that have been selected for this build. So if we start with The ECU, so the Motec ECU that I picked, and by the way, I should make this clear. This channel has no sponsorship. You know, all these items have been paid for by me. These are my opinions. There's no influence from others whatsoever. So I just wanted to share that, okay? So I selected the Motec M150. This is the modern technology from Motec for the ECU. It has quite a few channels on it itself for data logging. You could possibly get away with just a powerful ECU like this that has enough I/O where you wouldn't need to have another module for data. However, I run a ton of data on the car, and so I needed to have more than that. But this is the ECU. The approach for the approach for data logging had changed a little bit. So the car itself, you know, it's a Formula race car. I don't have a lot of dash room, if you will. There are data loggers that have a dash on them built in where you could actually mount that where you have view through your steering wheel. Again, I don't have any room for that. So what I ended up selecting is it's called an embedded data logger. It's got a ton of I/O, all upgradable like most of Motec's products. No display. This is the L180, and this all talks on CAN among all the different devices, but this is the data logger itself. The display is going to be the Motec, the D153, and the Motec's SLM, which is a programmable LED display for shift lights and so on. So this will actually mount in my steering wheel, and so I'll have a programmable display that I can actually use for gears and lap times and whatever else I want to view. So this is the display end of things. I wanted to modernize the car while I'm doing this build. This is the first time I've used a PDM. This is a power distribution module, again by Motec. And up until now, I've used old school mechanical relays like everybody else for you know, turning on various different items in the car, right? Like fuel pumps, water pumps, and so on. These trick little devices, and there are other manufacturers out there, talk on the CAN bus itself, and they're programmable, and they do a lot. So all power management for the entire car will come from this device, and it gives you power consumption or current control per device, so you can actually understand what your current draw on, I don't know, your fuel pump, whatever it may be. You can trigger alarms, you can simply log it. Very, very cool. So this is going to be a very nice, clean installation for power. Very quickly, I will be using GPS for track mapping. This is not the GPS I'll be using. I'll show you another video on this when I do this, but I will be using a 20 hertz GPS versus this 10 hertz low-end unit for a little higher resolution and granularity. So you'll see that coming. Back on the power management side, so this is a product, again, not sponsored from anybody. I'll put a link down below so you can see where this came from, but this is electronic solenoid to control master power for the vehicle. So if you think about most race cars, you have a hard mechanical on-off switch for your battery disconnect, right? That's just a physical mechanical switch that can be used, and it's required by all racing sanctions that you have that externally. Well, this is the actual on-off from the battery disconnect. I think it's 200 amp rating, and your control from external in the car is a simple little toggle switch, low current, that actually activates this. I've used this before in another race car. Really, really, really cool. Okay, so if we move to sensors, I can talk about a few of the sensors that I've picked up. Multiple sensors, all race grade products. You can use any sensor you want. The reason I selected these sensors and why I'm upgrading these, many of them have all the calibration activities already built in, so it makes it kind of easy. So this will be swapping out all the sensors in the car itself. From the ECU itself, for the coils, I will be using a Bosch 4-channel. These are low-cost devices. The Bosch 4-channel ignition igniter will actually drive the coil-over plug ignition itself. And two little things I'd like to talk about before I wrap up some of the parts that I've selected. So this is you probably can't see it very well. This is a NOx sensor. So I will be adding, for the first time, NOx sensors to my race engine. So the bike engines themselves do not have NOx sensors, and you could ask, well, why bother? And it's not for emissions control or things like that. Complete performance related. So if you think about when you tune your engine, you'll tune your engine for whatever environment you're running. Like in my case, open wheel racing, the engines will run at wide open throttle a lot, and upper range, upper revs and so on. And of course, the engine uses multiple controls to, or data sensor inputs to understand, obviously, how to pulse the fuel injectors and basic running the engine. But you have your more conventional sensor inputs like ambient air temperature, map sensors, throttle position sensors, and so on and so on. This, though, a NOx sensor, and why am I adding that? So I'm adding NOx sensors so the ECU can take corrective actions when the engine actually starts to experience knock, and it allows, from a tuning perspective, the ability to push the engine envelope to a much more aggressive tune than you would be able to do otherwise. So yes, water temp, air temp, other inputs into the engine do give the ECU the ability to understand, I'm reaching limits, I need to protect myself, I'm going to pull some fuel, or I'm going to retard timing, or I'm going to do things to protect the engine. Those sensor inputs are a little slow, to be honest with you. They take time to react. NOx sensors are typically logged at about 100 hertz, maybe 200 hertz, and ECUs, especially with very powerful modern ECUs, are able to actually understand and hear knock, very, very early, and then take corrective actions much, much quicker than you would be able to do with more traditional sensor inputs. So the idea behind this, we'll see, is that I will be able to have a more aggressive tune, yet have the ability to protect the engine under extreme circumstances, you know, very high ambient temperatures, whatever. And so that's why we're doing NOx sensors this year. Another one is Lambda. Now, okay, everybody runs Lambda. This is not a big deal. So for air fuel, you know, AFR, the air fuel mixture, Lambda gives you the ability, the Lambda sensors, to monitor your air fuel ratio. And this is one of the reasons why I run unleaded, by the way, because leaded fuels definitely, you know, kill O2 sensors. I've been running previously Lambda sensors in my car simply to monitor what my AFR is. With the old ECU, the old bike standard ECU, they are open loop only. They basically look at it, they monitor it, but they don't do anything with it. With the Motec upgrade, we will be in a what's called closed loop Lambda control. So fuel AFR will be understood and then corrected based on Lambda readings. And so what I'm going to be doing, if you can see this is a LTC dual Lambda. So this is a CAN module. So it actually has two Lambda sensors onto this module. And you'll ask, well, why two Lambda when I only have a 4-cylinder engine? It's for redundancy. And it allows you through the ECU to understand if you have an O2 sensor that's going off, right? It's starting to fail. It will still operate. You'll be able to finish your race because you have another O2 sensor that's operating correctly. So that's actually a pretty cool idea. So that will be in the car. One other item today on just the build and the parts for this this project. So this is a Geartronics GPU is what it's called, and this will no longer be used in the car. The car has had, and honestly this has worked flawlessly, a pneumatic controlled paddle shift capability using the Geartronics package. And it's an external system. You have this control module, you have your high pressure air system, you have gear sensor inputs, you have actuator to control your physical shifting, and you have ignition cut modules, you have throttle blippers, you get my idea. All the different components needed for a paddle shift assembly. The reason I'm bringing this up and telling you about this is with the Motec ECU, that's now all embedded in the ECU. It's really trick. So all this external stuff is being removed. So if anybody needs a Geartronics system, I have 2 full systems, just let me know. And the Geartronics control apparatus is part of the package embedded in the ECU itself. So this allows several things. One, I eliminate this external system, and blip, ignition cut, all those things for shifting from the paddles is now controlled in the ECU. And it allows me to also move to drive-by-wire. So previously I've been running a Gen 4 conventional throttle body assembly where the Geartronics pneumatic blipper actually was controlling the throttle body for downshifts. Again, that's all going to be removed. I will be using the Gen 6 throttle bodies that are all drive-by-wire, all controlled by the ECU, and so all the shifting from throttle, ignition, you know, blipping, if you will, and all those aspects of proper shifting through a paddle assembly will be done now in the Motec 150. So I hope that gives you a good idea what's going on. Lots of parts. I can talk about this stuff for a long time. You're going to see some really cool other modules that I will be adding to the car, like Wi-Fi capability and real-time data uploading and some really cool stuff. When I get closer to those installs, I'll do some breakout videos, you know, just on particular topics themselves. So you'll see those coming. But to wrap up today with this intro into this large project, you'll see videos coming out that will show you the progression along the way. And obviously the car has to get put together. You know, I have the engine out of it at the moment. You know, I have an engine up at the engine builder for refresh and on and on. But I'll take you with me and I'll have videos that actually show you the progression of putting the car back together to starting to build, you know, wire harnesses, adapting some of the modules in the car. You'll see some of the frustrations, obviously, that I find along the way. But I think whether you're an open wheel racer or not, I think a lot of the principles and a lot of what I will be doing here will be useful. And I'd like to say, really, look, I don't know everything, right? I've been racing for over 20 years. You know, I'm an engineer in background. But look, I will admit, I don't know everything and don't claim to proclaim that I do. I hope, though, some of what you hear and see is just another data point for you, right? Maybe pieces of what I go through will be useful for yourself, for whatever project you're working on. And that's it. I learned a long time ago from racers when I first started. I remember this old-time racer told, you know, basically was telling me, you know, you're going to hear a lot of people tell you about, you know, what you should do and the right thing, and here's how you go fast. And anyway, you kind of get my point. But he said, look, listen to everything, observe everything, take it in, but you try, you experiment, you learn along the way, and just think of all those others and the experiences they've done. It's just another data point, you know, for you to consider as you're seeking performance, you know, going faster and so on. So anyway, there's my story from way back. But anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you like what you're hearing, and you know, please, you know, subscribe, you know, like this channel, the video, and all those things that you're supposed to say. But you know, tell your other buddies about it, and I hope you follow along, because this project's going to take a couple months, and so you'll see multiple videos coming out on this. So anyway, Happy New Year. Talk to you later. Bye.